My name is Elara. The last thing I remember is the number on my screen, a quarterly projection glowing a furious, unforgiving red. I was halfway through prepping a presentation for a major client, a final push before the end of the day. I remember standing up, a sudden crushing tightness in my chest, and then nothing, just black. Monday, 7:51 p.m. That was the official time of collapse. I opened my eyes to the soft, steady metronome of a heart monitor. The doctor's chart notes my EKG is stable. "You can answer emails if you must," he says with a tired smile, not understanding that my work was never the problem. It was the other job, the one I never got paid for. 2 days later, a single notification lights up the sterile darkness of my phone. My sister, Maya, has tagged me in a photo. The photo is bright with sunshine that feels a world away. My parents, Maya, and my other sister, Chloe, are all beaming around a picnic table at a lakeside resort. My mum's signature deviled eggs are arranged perfectly on a platter. The caption hits me with a physical force harder than the collapse ever did. "A perfect family weekend, free of all the drama." They tagged me, like a punchline. If you have ever been chosen by a caption instead of a phone call, stay with me. This story is for you. Lying there, staring at the ceiling, the memories flooded back, not as a warm wave of nostalgia, but like a cold, methodical audit of my life. A photo of the National Data Modelling Award I won sits on my desk at home. I remember the text from Mom that day. "That's nice, dear. Did you thank your professor?" Another buzz on my phone, a bank notification. Payment sent. The applause in my head goes quiet. It became a reflex, a line item in my own mental budget labelled family maintenance fee. I would see the notification, feel that familiar dull ache of resignation, and approve the transfer. It was easier than dealing with the fallout, the guilt-tripping calls from my mother, the passive-aggressive silence from my sisters. I wasn't just sending money, I was buying peace, or so I told myself. In reality, I was just funding the next cycle of dysfunction, paying premiums on an insurance policy that never covered me. Maya's text, "Save me." I remember hesitating for a second, but then I sent it, because that's what I always did. Each time I paid her emergency rent, I knew I was just funding a weekend getaway I'd see on her story days later. Each time I covered a debt for my father, I knew I was erasing the tracks of a bad bet he'd never admit to making. The silence of my family wasn't peace, it was a transaction, a non-disclosure agreement I paid for monthly. Wednesday, 10:17 a.m. That's when Maya's no drama post went live. While I was being monitored for cardiac damage, they were passing the potato salad. 4 days after I collapsed, my phone, which had been hauntingly silent, suddenly erupted. 82 missed calls, all from them. Then a single text from my father, 5 words that felt like a command, not a plea. "We need you. Answer immediately." There was no "How are you?" No "Are you okay?" Just need. Raw, unfiltered, unapologetic need. Something inside me, something that used to jump with panic or guilt at a message like that, was just still. The emotional circuit had been severed. The fuse had finally blown. I didn't call them back. My fingers scrolled through my contacts, past their names, and landed on one I hadn't used in a long time. Gramps. He picked up on the second ring, as if he'd been waiting. He didn't ask how I was. He just asked, "Which hospital?" That was it. No hesitation, no questions, just an immediate response that made me feel like I mattered. He showed up an hour later, looking exactly the same. Same old windbreaker, same watch he'd worn since I was a kid. He sat down, looked at the wires and the IV, and then at me. "They took enough from me, Elara," he said, his voice quiet but heavy. "Don't let them take what's left of you." Then, instead of offering platitudes, he placed a dusty old shoebox on the hospital bed. It was heavy, weighted with more than just paper. "I can't fight this battle for you," he said, his voice firm and knowing. "I'm too old for their theatre, but I'm a good archivist. I kept this stuff because something felt wrong. You see things other people miss." I opened the box. Inside were years of his old bills, bank statements, letters, receipts, a chaotic paper trail of their financial lives. It wasn't a rescue, it was a data set. For the first day, I just stared at the box. It felt like an artifact from a sunken ship, waterlogged with years of unspoken truths. Part of me didn't want to open it. Part of me wanted to close the lid, call my mother back, and pretend that picture on Instagram was just a thoughtless mistake. That old instinct, the one that always chose the path of least resistance, the path of swallowing my own pain to keep the peace, was still there, whispering. It told me this was too much, that digging through this mess would only bring more pain. But then I'd look at the IV in my arm, feel the phantom ache in my chest, and remember the cold silence of the first 2 days. That silence was the truth. The box was just the evidence. So on the second day I took a deep breath, the kind you take before you dive into cold water. I pulled out my laptop, created a new encrypted folder, and named it The Audit. I wasn't just looking for numbers anymore, I was looking for a pattern. In my job, you learn that individual data points can be misleading, but patterns always tell a story. I was ready to finally read mine. From my hospital bed, which had been a prison of waiting, I turned my small corner of the room into an office. The rhythmic beep of the heart monitor became my metronome, a steady beat counting down to the truth. I spent hours digitizing the old papers, scanning receipts, and creating spreadsheets. Slowly, methodically, I started to cross-reference the data from the box with my own online bank records. A dark picture began to emerge. It was a financial forensic map of my family's deceit. A $3,000 withdrawal I made for Chloe's business investment lined up perfectly with the down payment on a new car she'd claimed a friend helped her buy. A loan to my father for a roof repair matched a cash withdrawal from an ATM near a racetrack. The data never lies. As the picture became clearer, I started to act. The cold, precise clicks of my mouse became a counter-rhythm to the heart monitor. Tap. Cancel recurring. A notification confirmed the change. Ding. Fraud alert enabled. The bank app flashed a confirmation. Swipe. Access removed. The ledger breathes. Then I found it. Buried in my email, forwarded from my grandfather's lawyer, who had been copied in on all hospital correspondence, was an email from Chloe. The subject line made my blood run cold. Elara's financial and healthcare POA, signed. Attached was a scanned PDF. I opened it. It was a power of attorney document giving them full control over my finances and medical decisions. And at the bottom, a signature that was eerily, terrifyingly like mine. That signature, it's close. For a second, I almost doubted myself. Had I signed this in a daze? But I knew I hadn't. I zoomed in on the notary seal. It looked official enough, but something felt off. I pulled up a search engine and typed in the notary's public ID number. The result came back instantly. Registrar result. Notary. Retired. Status. Deceased. My heart was pounding now, not from my condition, but from a cold, rising fury. I downloaded the PDF to my desktop and ran a simple tool, one I used at work all the time to check the history of documents. I checked the file's metadata, and there it was, glowing on the screen in stark digital certainty. The XMP timestamp post-dated my admission. They didn't just leave me for dead, they were trying to legally erase me. I took a slow, deliberate breath. Then I drafted an email to my father, mother, Maya, and Chloe. Subject: approval notice, final disbursement. The body was simple. It outlined a final, good faith payment to help them transition, and one condition. Please bring original POA to finalise. I hit send. The bait was set. My first call was to my grandfather's lawyer. I explained the situation calmly, emailing him the evidence pack, the fraudulent PDF, the screenshot of the deceased notary's record, and the damning metadata. Within an hour, a cease and desist letter was on its way to the hospital and my family, warning them against any attempt to use the forged document or interfere with my medical care. The legal door they had tried to kick open was slammed shut and bolted. My next 2 emails were sent anonymously from a secure account, one to my father's HR department, the other to the liaison for the travel brand that sponsored Maya. The subject was the same for both: for your due diligence. The body contained the same evidence pack, along with a link to Maya's no drama post. I wasn't going to fight them in the mud. I was just going to provide the receipts and let them hang themselves. And then, just 24 hours later, everything began to unravel for them. Blocked on the legal front and now facing internal inquiries, they pivoted. The battle moved to the one place they felt comfortable, the court of public opinion. Chloe posted a video. It was a masterpiece of manipulation. Her makeup was smudged, the lighting was dim, and she looked directly into the camera, her voice trembling. She never said my name, but she didn't have to. "It's so hard when someone in your family is going through something dark," she sniffled. "We're trying so hard to help him, but he's lashing out and hurting everyone. We just want our sister back." The sympathy poured in. "You're so strong. Praying for your family." But the evidence I had sent was already working its way through corporate channels. The public fallout began, not started by me, but amplified by the truth I had quietly provided. It started with a single comment from a stranger, a comment that went viral. It was a side-by-side screenshot. On the left, Maya's smiling vacation photo. On the right, a still from Chloe's tearful video. The user had added their own caption. "Wait, so you're crying with worry for your sister, but a few weeks ago you were on vacation calling her the drama. The math ain't mathing." It was like a spark in a tinderbox. The internet started digging. My family's carefully constructed public facade began to crumble under the weight of their own digital footprint. The final blow wasn't even digital. A small local news blog picked up the story. They didn't use our names, but the details were specific enough. The headline read, "Local influencers charity facade crumbles amidst family health crisis." They embedded the viral comment, screenshots of Maya's sponsored posts next to Chloe's tearful video. It wasn't just online gossip anymore, it was a public record of their hypocrisy. The brand that sponsored Maya's trip to Bali issued a public statement, apologising for their lack of due diligence and announcing they were donating her fee to a cardiac care charity. They weren't just losing face, they were losing the currency they valued most: public adoration. The panicked messages to my phone stopped. They were replaced by a single desperate text from my mother. The tone was completely different now. No demands, no guilt, just 5 words. "Elara, please, can we just talk?" I ignored it. Talking was their arena. A place where facts dissolved into feelings and blame was a shell game. I wasn't playing anymore, but I knew they wouldn't give up. In a final, desperate move, my father called, his voice on the voicemail a mix of fury and panic, demanding a reconciliation meeting to fix this mess. He mentioned my email about the final disbursement. They had taken the bait, I agreed, but on my terms. I wasn't going to their house or my grandfather's. This wasn't a family chat. This was a final review. I used my own money to rent a small, sterile boardroom for 1 hour. Friday 2 PM. a cold, neutral space with a long table and a large screen at one end. I summoned them. I was no longer the one being called upon. I was the one calling the meeting. The boardroom hummed low with the sound of the air conditioning. They arrived together, a united front of manufactured grievance. My father, clutching a manila envelope, the original POA, I presumed, started immediately, his voice booming with false authority, talking about loyalty and how I was destroying everything they had built. I let him talk for a moment, then I held up a hand. "I believe you've all seen the agenda," I said, my voice calm and even. I connected my laptop to the large screen. The HDMI cable clicked into place. The title slide appeared in stark white letters on a black background. The final audit. I clicked to the next slide. A detailed, damning flowchart flooded the screen. It was my masterpiece, a web of arrows and dates and dollar amounts, tracking the flow of my money through their lives for the past 5 years. There was a stunned silence. "This isn't an argument," I said, my voice as clinical as the room around us. "This is a final report. Mother, father, this house wasn't lost because of me. It was lost because its assets were liquidated to fund an unsustainable enterprise." I looked at each of them. "Maya," I said, clicking to a slide showing her bank statements next to my withdrawals. "Did you know your $5,000 emergency loan actually paid off Dad's credit card debt from his frequent trips to the casino?" Maya's face went pale. She shot a venomous look at our father. "Chloe," I continued, "your seed money for the boutique. It came from a second mortgage on the car I was paying for, the one I still owe money on." Chloe stared at the screen, her mouth slightly open. My mother finally spoke, her voice shaking with practiced disappointment. "Elara, why are you doing this? This isn't you. We're family." I turned to her, my gaze steady. I clicked to a new slide. It showed a timeline of her phone calls to me. Every single one was within 24 hours of a major bill being due, or one of my sisters having a crisis. Not once in 5 years had she called just to ask how I was. "You're right, Mom. This is me. This is the me who finally stopped confusing enabling with love. You weren't the peacemaker. You were the manager. The one who made sure the asset was always performing, always ready to cover the losses. Every time you told me to be the bigger person, what you really meant was be the one who pays." My father stood up, his face red. "Daughter, don't... You're about to destroy everything we've... Companies negotiate exits." I cut him off, my voice quiet but sharp. "Families show up." I let the silence hang in the air as they looked at each other, the trust between them shattering like glass. I disconnected my laptop. The screen went black. "As of today," I said, looking at each of them one last time, "I'm not your revenue stream. I'm your audited past." I walked out of that boardroom without looking back, leaving them in the cold silence of their own creation. The fallout was predictable. A formal letter arrived from my father's lawyer, a piece of theatre stating that, in a newly drafted will, I had been formally disinherited. I had my lawyer respond with a simple 2-sentence letter. It included a signed and notarized legal waiver, permanently relinquishing any and all claims to any family estate. It was a formal rejection of their final bait. I don't owe, and I'm not owed. 2 weeks later, my grandfather and I packed our things. He said he wanted to see the mountains again, and I wanted to see anything other than the city that held so many ghosts. We found a small cabin just outside a quiet town, nestled in the pines. I took a remote job, one that allowed me to work from anywhere. I cut my hours. I started reading again, breathing again. The final scene of my old life played out on my phone, a text from a distant cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. "Hey, heard some crazy stuff is going on. What really happened?" I looked at the message, at the question hanging in the digital air. I thought about the long, complicated story I could tell, the story of the audit, the fraud, the lies. But explaining felt like reopening the ledger I had fought so hard to close. They'll tell their story, let them have it. You have the truth. My grandfather's words echoed in my mind. And the truth, well, it's quiet. It doesn't need an audience. Being loved by people who need a receipt for their affection, that's the loudest, loneliest noise in the world. I smiled, a real, genuine smile. I put my phone down on the table, screen facing down. I picked up my book, took a deep breath of the cool mountain air, and continued reading. When a relationship becomes a bad debt, do you write it off or attempt to restructure? Leave your final verdict in the comments below. Some ledgers aren't written in ink, but in silent sacrifice. If you understand that, subscribe and ring the bell, because at Whispers of Revenge, we believe true justice is when you no longer have to check the receipts.